It's a 5-part series on practical Judaism. I decided that we should start with Friday night. Why with Friday night? Because I think that it's the most practical element of Judaism that is most widely.
It's very down late now. Look at how black it is outside.
Give me 1 second.
Put your head.
I'm going to just mute everybody, and then if anybody would like to speak, just unmute yourself or write something in the comments. I'll leave the comments box open just so that it doesn't distract other people when they're here. So this class could be considered relatively basic for some, but even the people that do this every single week, I'm sure most of you do, or many of you do a Friday night every week, you will still find, I'm hoping, some things that you don't know, which could add a lot of meaning into how we do Friday night. Now, Friday does not start from when we light the candles on Friday night. That's not when it starts. It's supposed to start Friday morning, but actually traditionally we know that Friday night is supposed to start from the beginning of the week. How do I tell you that? Why do I say that? Because one of the daily prayers that we have is the song of the day. And the song of the day says, today is the first day. So Sunday, for example, what do we say? Hayom Yom Rishon B'Shabbat. Today is the first week of Shabbat. Shabbat is the first day from Shabbat, the first day till Shabbat. So when we're busy looking at the days of the week, the Hebrew names, the days of the week, go by, we call it first day, second day, third day, fourth day. It's not like by the English calendar where we call them Monday, Tuesday, which are like Greek names for planets and things like that. It's actually all in relation to Shabbat. So everything in our week surrounds Shabbat. There's a story about one of the great sages named Shammai, that he was told that he would buy food on Sunday, and he would look for whatever looked good in the marketplace. In those days, you had to go shopping every day. There was no refrigerator. And the first day of the week, he would buy a fish or whatever it was, and he said, this is for the honor of Shabbat. The next day, he would find something better, and of course, it's not going to last all week without the fridge. So he would say, the next day is for Shabbat. So every day is really a working towards Shabbat. So some of us look at Shabbat as a day of restrictions, a day of hardship. I believe, and I think that this is something that we can all achieve, that the more we learn and appreciate Shabbat, the more of a celebration. It actually becomes a day that we look forward to more than ever. I think just think to yourself now, the last few months we've been more or less home-based most of the time. How much do we appreciate? Of course, we would love to get out once in a while, but we also get to appreciate a little bit the concept of being home. So while you have to be home and there's other restrictions, we're not going to talk about the restrictions really today. That's not going to be the focus of tonight. We will talk about a little bit in the future classes, just touch on some of them. Tonight, I want to focus more on what we do. But by realizing that all these restrictions are actually there to help us achieve something, it's like if you want to be able to play the piano, you're going to have to follow particular rules. Each note makes a particular sound. You can't change that. There's only a certain amount of notes. That is all there to achieve the most beautiful music. The same thing is with everything in Shabbat. The more we do, the more we understand, the more of a beautiful day it becomes. So we're going to get into it, and we're going to start. I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown of what we're actually going to discuss today. Today we're going to be discussing how a person is supposed to prepare for Shabbat. We're going to discuss the Friday evening, candle lighting, and the Shabbat meal. So I will actually share my screen for part of the time so that you can see some slides. Give me 1 second as I share my screen. Okay, so why do we have to prepare for Shabbat? The reasons why we have to prepare is, number one, because there are certain acts which we are not supposed to do. For example, we're not supposed to have light lit on Shabbat. Today's day and age, we have all types of Shabbat lamps that if we set them up, we've got to turn off the lights that we don't want to be using, like in our bedrooms, and turn on, possibly we have like Shabbat lamps that are able to go totally dark without having to actually turn off a switch. Set up those. You want to make sure that your ovens are off. And if you want to put something on a hot plate, that's part of preparing for Shabbat. That's number one. Things are forbidden. Number two is we want to make sure one of the things that we're supposed to do on Shabbat is we're supposed to have what's called oneg, pleasure. So in order, what are those pleasurable things? Like eating food. Shabbat is called Shabbat, the day of pleasure. We're supposed to have some type of pleasure. Now, it's a day of pleasure for our soul. We're going to talk about how Judaism also would like us to have pleasure for our bodies as well. And that's the food that we have to prepare. And number three, the next thing we have to have is kavod. So we have to honor it, honor the Shabbat, just like a royal guest. If you had a royal guest in our house, how would we prepare for that guest? Shabbat is considered a special guest. So we are going to seek out opportunities to personally prepare for Shabbat. What does this mean? This is what it says in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. One should rise early on Friday to prepare what is needed for Shabbat. Even if you have many servants, find something small to do in honor of Shabbat. We see this with Rav Chisda, who would cut vegetables finely, Rabbah and Rav Yosef, who would chop wood, Rabbi Zera, who would light the flame, Rav Nachman, who would clean the house and replace the weekday cutlery with cutlery designated for Shabbat. We can emulate them. One should not say it is unbecoming of me, for this is the honor of Shabbat. So the point is that even if you're living in a house where the men do all the preparation and the women sit and relax and do nothing, the woman should find something to do. If you live in a house that for some strange reason it's the opposite way and the women do most of the cooking, the men should also find something to do. I don't know if that exists anywhere around where we live, but if such a thing does exist, everyone, so customarily we make sure, for example, setting up the candles for Shabbat traditionally has been something that is done by the father of the house or one of the men in the house. It's usually not done by the woman unless it has to be. But just to make sure, so often men are at work, come home late, and women try to end work early. We should all try to actually end work early on Shabbat, even if you are don't have to do anything special for Shabbat, and most of it's being taken care without you. One should still try to have Shabbat, partake in some of the preparations. Okay. The next thing that is supposed to be done on Erev Shabbat is we are supposed to have, there's actually a shopping list that you can find for anybody that wants to have notes on this class. So you could actually have an easy way to go back and see what we discussed tonight. You can go into the chat box. If you are on Facebook or elsewhere, there are other ways that you can find it. You can go into the chat box and you will be able to see, you can see there's a link to notes. And in those notes, there's also a link to Chabad.org where you can find how to prepare for Shabbat. There's also recipes for Shabbat. One of the things we're supposed to do is we're supposed to make challah. Now, challah, generally, most people probably end up baking challah. Or should I say buying challah, but maybe during lockdown, more people have the time to bake challah. Now, challah is a bread. Why is challah called challah? Challah means to take off a part. Part of the challah is, part of the challah was supposed to be given every time you make a certain amount of bread. Traditionally, according to law, it was actually this past week's portion. You have to give a portion of that to the Kohen. That portion that you would take off, it's a certain percentage that you had to give to the Kohen, was called challah. Today, the bread that we eat on Shabbat, we call on that name. That's why it's called challah. Otherwise, it's just bread. But we're extra careful that for Shabbat, we try to bake our own challah if possible, if you have the time and you know how to do it. And also you have to make a particular amount in order to take challah. So people would try to take the right amount. Now, tonight is not a discussion on how to make challah. I'm sure my wife will be doing those type of classes. There's thousands of those online, and everyone can find that opportunity. But it's a wonderful thing if you don't do it yet to take challah. But you do have to take a certain amount. You separate the challah. Now, today's day and age, we can't give the challah to the kohen for numerous reasons. Number one, because it has to be in temple times where they go through certain purity, and a whole variety of reasons of why we cannot give the challah to the kohanim. So what do? We're not allowed to eat that portion. We make the bracha, which means to separate it. In theory, this is going to God. It is going to God, who's the representative of God, the people that serve in the temple, those are the kohanim. Today, we can't give it to them. So what do? We burn it. We take that piece of challah, we put it in the oven with nothing else there, because we're not allowed to have any benefit from it. And we burn it in the oven alone. Once you usually would wrap it in like silver foil or paper or something, and you allow it to cook till it becomes hard that you cannot eat it. That's what I mean by burn it. It doesn't actually cause a flame, but we make sure that we have no benefit from it. I don't think many people always realize the importance of this mitzvah. It's actually considered one of the main mitzvot that women have. Okay, going forward, what are the other ways of how we prepare for Shabbat? One is supposed to clean their house. Now, I understand that today's day and age, most people are not having many guests, right? We're not all having guests. So when you have guests, it's easy and you're excited to clean the house. But today, who's really excited? We're not having guests, so we're not so enthusiastic about cleaning the house. But we're still supposed to do it. Why? Because our guest is Shabbat. We have some royalty that's coming. We're supposed to clean their home. We're supposed to make beds. We're supposed to put a special tablecloth. I put the special tablecloth on this table today, especially so that I can actually kind of make it look somewhat real. Customarily, we use a white tablecloth for Shabbat. For the Chagim, for the festivals, Yom Tovim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, well, not Yom Kippur, even Yom Kippur, except for Yom Kippur, all the other festivals, we don't have to have a white tablecloth. Now, the reason given is that generally white is connected to purity, Kabbalistic. You don't have to have a white tablecloth, but we are supposed to put a tablecloth. Even if you have no guests, we should put a tablecloth on the table. Ideally, that tablecloth should be white. It should be there ideally for the entire Shabbat, the entire duration till Saturday night, okay? Even if you're not at that moment using it. So once we have covered our table, we're supposed to shower in honor of Shabbat, cut our nails. If necessary, we take a haircut, and we are supposed to get dressed in our best. Why do we get dressed in our best? Well, if we have guests coming, it's easy. But the reason we're supposed to get dressed in our best is numerous reasons given why we get dressed on Shabbat. Number one, because we consider the day of Shabbat a holy day, and the guest, the Queen of Shabbat, is coming to our house. So we want to respect that presence of the Queen of Shabbat. So we get dressed in our best. We'll wear a suit, we'll wear smart clothing that we normally would not use otherwise. Some people customarily would not use any weekday clothes on Shabbat. Now, just remember, I'm going to tell you everything. Everyone, of course, will choose what they are up to and what they want to actually accept, what you do in your house, your own. That's fine. I'm just telling you everything as much as I can, and you choose what you're, on your own level, what you're prepared to do. Okay, so whether or not we're having guests, we're supposed to get dressed up. I know that sometimes it's a lot easier to sit in our pajamas around the house. Coronavirus has definitely made some people stay in pajamas all day. If you are going to get out of your pajamas one day, it definitely should be for Friday night and Shabbat day. It's the best thing we could do for the Shabbat Queen. It also reminds us that it is a special day. Give me 1 second. Chaimishka? Okay, it looks like my battery's going to die. Okay, I'll try to get through this. Let's start to get more practical. There's other customs that people generally do. The battery's running low.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, I couldn't find the plug. Okay, 1 second.
There's an extension cord in the dining room. Okay, sorry about that. I just got a notice that my computer battery is running low. Let's go into Shabbat candles. So once you've done all your preparations for Shabbat, it's some people have the custom. Some people have the custom to actually study the portion of that week's Torah portion. And some people do what's called Shnai Mikveh Targum. They repeat it, going over it twice. But this is what we do on Friday afternoon. Some people don't have the time. I don't think I very often have the time to review the portion. I review it during the week, and then I review it on Shabbat. But I don't usually have much time on Friday afternoon to do that.
Excuse me, Rabbi, have you changed the slide? Because I have the first one with the challah. Is it still the same slide?
It's still the same slide. Yeah. I haven't changed yet.
Okay.
Now, could you see the change?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Good point. You know what? I actually forgot to change the slides. So thank you for reminding me to change the slides. Okay. What? Okay. Okay, so just to revise, we prepare by cleaning the house, making our beds, taking a shower, cutting our nails, and a haircut if necessary. Now we're going to go into the actual Shabbat. We've now prepared. We're all groomed, looking clean, done all our preparations, and now we are ready to light the Shabbat candles. When are we supposed to light the Shabbat candles? Shabbat candles ideally should be lit 18 minutes before sunset. Now that's not sundown, that's sunset. So today, that would have been, or this Shabbat, you get candle lighting times. When you get that candle lighting time, that is 18 minutes before sundown. So to give you an example, this past week, we said candle lighting, I think it was 5:25. I'm just looking if I can find it on my phone right now for today. 5:25 is candle lighting. That is 18 minutes before sundown. Why do we do 18 minutes before sundown? The reason why we do 18 minutes is because we don't want to go into the Shabbat. If we were to tell you the exact time, so if it's 5:25, add on 18 minutes, what is the time that Shabbat comes in? Where's the math? Yarden, you're still in school, you should still be able to use your mind. So it would be 5:43, right? 5:43 is when Shabbat actually enters. So ideally, the woman should be lighting candles. Generally, candle lighting is done by the woman. It should be done 18 minutes before sunset. Interestingly enough, some people have different customs. For example, in Jerusalem, the custom is that they light Shabbat candles 40 minutes before. I don't know the reason for it. I think it's just because they're extra stringent. But that's what they do. They light the Shabbat candles 40 minutes prior to the coming of that Shabbat comes in. We light it, most of the rest of the world only light it 18 minutes in advance. Now, Shabbat candles can be lit by a male or a female. I know we always think it has to be women, but generally we give the mitzvah to women. The mitzvah is given to women, but it's not like certain other mitzvahs. For example, you have the mitzvah of mikvah, which is especially a mitzvah for women. Of course, there's times that men go as well, but the mitzvah of mikvah, family purity, is especially for women. The mitzvah of tefillin is especially for men. But then there's certain mitzvot which can be done by either. Even though they can be done by either, they're generally given over to one side. What's an example of those two mitzvot? Two mitzvot that we're going to talk about tonight. Candle lighting, for example, can be done by a man or a woman. And kiddush can be done by a man or a woman. However, the mitzvah of candle lighting was given to the woman. Now, there's numerous reasons. One of the reasons given is because the woman is in charge of the house, and the whole purpose of why we light candles is to bring light into the house. And therefore, because the woman's in charge of that role, she is going to light the Shabbat candle. But if there's no woman in the house, the man should light. So I can give you an example. When I was in yeshiva, in our dormitories, there was always a boy. I sometimes lit the candles for the entire yeshiva. Why? Because we had no woman living on site. There was not going to be any woman in our dormitories. So if you happen to be 1 week, either you're single, or your wife is away one Shabbat or whatever it is, and there's no woman in the house, the man should light. The obligation is on the house. But the one that generally is in charge of that is the woman. Now, why do we have this concept of lighting Shabbat candles? The reason why we do the Shabbat candles is for numerous reasons, but historically, 3 reasons that I can think of in particular. I'll go back to sharing my screen for a moment. So historically, people were afraid to leave their candles burning. Why? Because they thought that it's a waste of fuel. It's like a waste of electricity. So they would sit in the dark the whole of Shabbat. Another reason is because there were certain people known as the Sadducees that did not believe in the oral Torah. The Torah says you cannot light a fire on Shabbat. And because of that, what they did is they actually would sit in dark, even though the rabbi instituted, because they said you can't light, you can't have a fire going the whole of Shabbat. So therefore, what did they do? They sat in the dark. Now, one of the things that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to respect Shabbat. How are you going to respect Shabbat if everybody is fighting and tripping over each other? There's no street lights. If it's dark in those days, you didn't light a candle, it was pitch black. And one of the things that we said that we're trying to do is we're supposed to respect Shabbos. We're supposed to have pleasure on Shabbat. How are you supposed to have pleasure and respect if it's pitch black and everyone is screaming and shouting at each other? So the rabbis instituted not only that we can light candles before Shabbat, but we have to, we're obligated. So much so, the Torah says, if you have to sell parts of your belongings in order to buy a candle or oil to light the Shabbat candles, you should do it. That's how important Shabbat candles are. Okay, now who has to light the Shabbat candles? Sorry, one more point. An important point I forgot. What happens if it's summer and sunset is not till late, after 8 o'clock at night, let's say 8:30 at night, and you want to light candles earlier? How much earlier can you light the Shabbat candles? So generally, the max that you can light, the earliest you can light the Shabbat candles is approximately an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. In the summer, you could probably light about an hour and 15 minutes before candle lighting time. In the winter, probably the earliest is an hour before, but you're not going to want to light that much earlier because in any case, it's early. But in the summer where it gets late, I remember I was in Holland and there we were taking in Shabbat. The earliest time, it got dark so late, like 11:30 at night, that the earliest we can take in Shabbat was about 9:30 at night. But if we would have taken out when it actually came dark, it was about 11:30. 1 second, yes? Yes. Sorry, a personal note from Yitzchak. Thank you. Okay, good night, Yitzchak. So why do we, or when do we have to make sure that the candles are lit by? The latest is, what happens if it comes the 18 minutes before the Shabbat candles light and you haven't lit the Shabbat candles? It's winter, it's an early time, and you were supposed to light the Shabbat candles, let's say at 5:25, but you missed it. So what should you do? So the answer is you have 18 minutes from the time that the candle lighting time was. If that 18-minute pass, ideally you should no longer, it's actually not allowed to light candles because now Shabbat is entered. So if you missed the boat, you missed the boat. So I know we all like to light Shabbat candles, and that's why we make a special emphasis to start at least 18 minutes earlier. If we have to, we go into those 18 minutes, but once those 18 minutes after candle lighting time has passed, we don't light Shabbat candles. We'd rather go without Shabbat candles for that week. Now, if you want to find candle lighting times, by the way, you could always find them Chabad.org. They always have up-to-date candle lighting times for all over the world.
Rabbi?
Yes.
May I ask a quick question about,
Sure.
so far we're talking about lighting an actual candle with an actual flame. If someone's in a situation where they don't have access to a candle or they're not allowed to light a match where they are, the traveling hotel room, can they use, say, an electric light in substitute of a candle?
Yes, and this is a very interesting question. Traditionally, we know that candle lighting is done only with a candle. So you have to light, it has to be an actual fire. However, interestingly enough, the Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch, he writes that because the mitzvah, this is 250 years ago when they never had electric lights, because the mitzvah is in order just to bring light into the home, therefore, if you're not for some reason able to light a candle, then the concept is bringing light. So I could tell you, for example, my wife had kids on Shabbat and in the hospital. So what does she always pack? She always packs, these are LED tea lights that she takes with her. And you can actually, what's called b'diavad, in that circumstances, you can light those candles and make a bracha on them. It's something unique where you can make a bracha on like something that's totally not like the mitzvah. Why? Because the mitzvah is to bring the light into your house, which brings another point, Joe, now that you mentioned that the concept of candle lighting is to bring light into the home. In the old days, most homes were made up of like two rooms. There was the main dining room, and then there was the bedroom, behind the curtain or whatever it was, 1 or 2 bedrooms max. Houses were a tenth the size of what we live in today. So therefore, you lit the one candle room had light and the other rooms didn't. Today's day and age, because we're going to be using numerous rooms and you want to use the lounge, we're supposed to turn on the lights in all the rooms that we want to have, like if you need a hallway light on, or if you need a lounge room on, even the kitchen light, they should all be turned on before Shabbat, and that's all part of that mitzvah of lighting candles. Though the only bracha we will say is on the actual candle lighting. Okay, now I mentioned already who lights the candles is done by women, but if men aren't, if there's no woman to do it, then a man could do it. Interestingly enough, the concept of lighting candles, about 100 years ago, before the First World War, the general custom throughout Jewry was that all girls over the age of 3 lit Shabbat candles. Now, once there was, or in times of poverty, and particularly, around the times of the war, there was a shortage and people couldn't afford for everyone to light candles. So the custom became that the mother of the home lit the candles. However, lately, and particularly under the guidance of the Rebbe, he's reintroduced that all girls over the age of 3 should light Shabbat candles. We train them from, and people will say, but that wasn't the custom of my grandparents. Yes, it wasn't. But if you go back several generations, it was a custom for all, that all girls lit Shabbat candles. So you could have 5 candles from 5 different candle people lit. Now, how many candles are lit? Traditionally, a single woman or a single man would light one candle. If the person is married, they light two candles. Why do they light two candles? So there's numerous explanations. One explanation is because one for the man and one for the woman. She's lighting for her husband. Based on that reasoning, a woman that has children, she adds, some have the custom, not all people, some have the custom that they add one candle per child. So for example, thank God, we have 5 children. My wife lights 5 candles for the children, and she has 2 separate candles that she lights that she's been lighting, candlesticks that she got when she got married. It's actually considered very often candlesticks are a wedding gift that is given by the groom. Why? Because it's here, here's your gift. You're going to be bringing light into the home. So traditionally, grooms have given this as a gift to their wives to encourage them to bring the light into the home and to remind them of that. So my wife still has her candlesticks that she got as a present from me when we got married, and we've now got a separate candlestick for the kids. And you know, as the family grows, so you're trying to find ways to add more candlesticks to it. So that's the way it's done. So for example, in my family, we have, my wife lights 7 candles, and then Sarah, our daughter, will light a candle herself. So before we have even any guests, we will already be lighting 8 candles. And please God, when Sivi will turn 3, our daughter Sivi, now she's not 1 yet, but when she turns 3, she'll also be lighting 1 candle. Okay, so now, as I said, that's not custom for everybody, but many people have such a custom. Now, I really should call my wife in. If she's not busy, she's welcome to walk in. She probably could hear me from somewhere in the house, to show you how candle lighting is done. Most of you may know, but I want to teach you a few interesting things. I'm going to do this experiment only with 1 candle. But let's try to see how it's done. The way it is done is interesting. If you watch what I'm doing, I'm not going to say Hashem's name. I am going to just, hey, you want to do the candle lighting? Okay, my wife overheard, so she's going to come show us how the candle lighting is done.
I'm listening to the class.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, Chaimishka will show us how the candle lighting is done. So do it, the whole thing just without Hashem's name, but you have to sit down so that the camera can see you.
Okay, hello. All right. Okay, so usually the candles are ready. You make sure the wick is up, because once you light it, then it becomes Shabbat. So your matches become, you're not supposed to touch matches on Shabbat. So that's why we make sure it's all ready. And we match.
So first you light.
You light. So once the candle's lit, it's Shabbat. So we just drop the candle. We don't usually don't blow it out because it's already Shabbat. So you just leave the match. That's why you have like a piece of silver foil or a tray. And also usually if you have kids, the daughters will light first so that you can help them. And then once the candle's lit, my custom is to cover my eyes. So you go around the candles and you cover your eyes. And we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shek lishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'adik ner shel Shabbat Kodesh. And then usually we pray when we light the candles. It's a very special time. They call it an et ratzon. It's a time to pray for your family. So whoever's lighting the candles, usually the woman or whoever it is, generally they'll stay with their eyes covered for a bit longer, and they'll pray for, you know, that there should be light in the home and peace and shalom bayit and health and all the things that you're praying for. Did I miss anything else?
Oh, I know. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so that is hands-on experience number 1, experiment number 1. We've got our beautiful candle over here. Does anybody know why we cover our eyes? What is the lady or the man? By the way, if a man does it, he would cover his eyes as well. Why do they cover their eyes? Okay, so I'll give you the answer. The answer is that generally in Jewish law, when we say a bracha, let's give you an example. if we're going to hear the shofar, please God, Rosh Hashanah is coming, we're going to be hearing the shofar. What do we do first? Do we first say the bracha, or do we first blow the shofar? We first say the bracha. Okay, that's why, because there's a concept that you break the halacha says, or the Torah says, so to speak, that we have to say the blessing before we do the mitzvah. Now, when it comes to lighting a candle, like, you know, when we do Hanukkah candles, what do we do with Hanukkah? With Hanukkah candles, we first make the bracha lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah, then we light the candle, correct? We first make the bracha on the shofar, then we blow the shofar. We first make the bracha on the levan etrog, then we shake the levan etrog. We always have to make the bracha first. But when it comes to lighting the candle, we have a problem on Shabbat. Once we've made the bracha, we've accepted Shabbat. So we will no longer be able to light a match. So we're in a conundrum. So what do? We light the candle, we cover our eyes so we don't have proper benefit from the candle. Then we, so to speak, accept the Shabbat, welcome the Shabbat, and when we open our eyes, we are getting new benefit from the candle. When we get that new benefit from the candle, it's as though, even though we said the blessing, we said the bracha while our eyes were covered, it's as though now we just lit it. So it becomes, because we're getting the benefits of the candle after the blessing, it's as though we did the blessing beforehand. Okay, that's why we cover our eyes. And also, that is an auspicious time, as my wife said, to pray, especially to pray for our children, for our families. Another thing that I did leave out is traditionally, men and women, but particularly women, we give charity before lighting candles. It's actually customary to give charity that goes directly to poor people. So in Judaism, charity that goes to organizations, all those things are just as important. But this particular time, it's a time that we particularly give to an organization that supports poor people. If you have such a thing, we have a special charity box by our Shabbat candles. Okay? So that's where, now, where do you put your candles? The place that you're supposed to put your candles is somewhere in vision from the table. So many people, if you have a nice wide table, you could leave your candles on your table. But if you do not have a big table, you could leave them on the side. They don't have to be. The most important element of this is that they should be in view. The candles should be in view of the person making Kiddush, because that's where we're going to get to. You'll see that when we say Kiddush, we're actually supposed to look at the candles. So that's why we make sure the candles are in view of the person saying Kiddush. They don't have to be on the table, but we have to be in view. So it's not a great idea to light candles in a different room and then have Shabbat in a different room. We want to do it in the same room that we are actually doing the Shabbat meal. Now, we're going to go on further into the Shabbat meal. What do we use for candles? I'm just looking at a few other things that I may have mentioned. Okay. One extra point that I wanted to mention, when we don't, what my wife mentioned about dropping the match, why do we drop the match, as she mentioned? Because if we blow it out, once we've lit it, we have somewhat accepted Shabbat. So we don't want to actually put it out, because once Shabbat comes in, we cannot blow it out. That's why we drop it onto a silver tray, or if you don't have a silver tray, just a piece of silver foil. That's what can be done. Don't drop it into a piece of wood or anything that is not metal. That just would not be safe. So make sure that safety first, taking all those precautions. If it is a festival, the festival has already come in. Let's say it's the second night of the festival. then what we do is we have a pre-existing fire. So that's why people often use those 24-hour or 48-hour candles for a festival. And if it's a 3-day festival, they'll have a 72-hour candle. That's why they make the 72-hour candles for 3-day festivals. And we're not supposed to light a candle on the festivals. We'll talk about that a little bit in some of the future weeks. So what we would do is we would stick our match into that yahrzeit candle, and because you're allowed to light a fire on a Yom Tov, but you're not allowed to make a new fire. So you have to take from a pre-existing fire. That's for festivals. So you can light from a pre-existing flame. You cannot light a new one on a festival. But once again, we don't extinguish fires on a festival, so we would just drop it. Even more importantly. Okay. One last thing. Generally, we pray, after we finish praying and we open, we look at the candles, we get the benefit from the candles, and we say Shabbat Shalom. So we say Shabbat Shalom to everybody that is around, all our family and friends. We would say Shabbat Shalom to them. And that's, some people share a kiss to all the kids or whoever's around. Whatever you would like to do, you can do. Now, this would be the appropriate time to start discussing the Shabbat prayer service, but we'll do that as a separate talk. This is not going to do tonight. We're going to focus on the Shabbat meal. The next thing that we do is the Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, we first sing Shalom Aleichem. What does it mean? Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharetz. I'm going to try to show you part of it on the board once again. So, one second, sorry. Okay, so we're up to Shalom Aleichem. Whoops, went back. Okay, so this is just revising quickly. When do we do it? Before sunset, 18 minutes. If you want to do it not too early with something called Plaga Mincha, you could look on your calendar, half Mincha. It's about an hour and 15 minutes before sunset in the summer. Okay, this is the blessing, obligation, men and women. The custom is that women do it, and girls over 3. It should be visible from the tail, clear burning. We give tzedakah, all these things. Sorry, going on. Now we're up to Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharetz. This is a Kabbalistic prayer. Why do we have this? The prayer of Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem means that we're welcoming. First, we are saying goodbye to the angels. So we're told that on Friday night, we're escorted by angels. Those angels, so the first thing you'll see is Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem could mean welcome, or it could mean goodbye. So actually, if you see the first line says Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharetz, Shalom Aleichem, peace be unto you, the escorting or the serving angels. That actually is talking about the angels of the weekday. So we say goodbye to them. Then the next paragraph, we say Boachem l'shalom Malachei Hashalom. Boachem l'shalom. The next 3 paragraphs, we're actually talking about the special angels that would escort us on Shabbos. And they come, the Zohar says something quite interesting about this. Look what the Zohar says. When we return from the synagogues, and today it would be from wherever we were in the room before, because I don't think anybody is going to synagogue currently, angels accompany us on each side while the divine presence hovers above us. And the angels, if we enter our homes with joy and receive guests with joy, and if upon arrival the angels and the divine presence see the candles lit, the table set, and the husband and wife both joyous, at that moment the divine presence says, "This is mine, Israel in which I take pride." So that's from the Zohar. It's a Kabbalistic prayer. The author of Shalom Aleichem was once again from the 16th or 17th century. It is actually unknown who the author of the Zohar is. And we generally repeat each stanza. There's 4 stanzas of the Shalom Aleichem. We would repeat each stanza 3 times. Okay? So going forward, the next thing that is done generally is the Ashes Chayil. I want to just put one point over here. We have put together a Friday night guide with transliteration of most of what we're going to discuss tonight. If you have not got that or you would like a copy, I'm happy to send you a PDF. And afterwards, when the times clear up, I will give you also a hard copy of this booklet. I've given it to some people already, a transliteration, Hebrew, English, and transliteration booklet. Okay, the next prayer is Ashes Chayil. I don't want to get too much into this part. Ashes Chayil was written in Proverbs by King Solomon. It's a praise. Many people believe that it was originally written by Abraham as a praise for his wife Sarah, adapted by King Solomon as a praise for his mother Bathsheba. And if you go through it, there are hints to 22 different women throughout history. There is one line that hints to Esther, one line that is to Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and 22 of the most famous women in history are hinted to in these passages. One is for Ruth, one is for Esther. And this has been the way that traditionally people, and men in particular, have praised their Jewish wives throughout the ages. Now, another reason why we say the Ashes Chayil is because we believe that Shabbat is it's a feminine godly power which is known as the queen, and the feminine presence appears on Shabbat, and that is represented by the Ashes Chayil. Ashes Chayil prayer is a representation of that. Okay, there's so much more we could talk about Ashes Chayil. We'll leave it at that for now. The next thing we're going to go on to now is the Kiddush. You've stand your shalom, you've lit your candles before Shabbos, and now we are going to do the Kiddush. Now, before your Kiddush is done, what you're going to do, I'm going to move my candles. I don't know if you can see me. I should really print myself. Okay. Now, what we would do when we have our Shabbat meal, what do we have for our Shabbat meal? We have the candles somewhere around, and then we have, first of all, we have our challah covers. The challah is covered. Why do we cover our challahs? Why do we cover our challahs? If you see over here, we have the challah cover. There's beautiful challah covers that you can find. This is a challah cover. Underneath this, I've got two little challahs that were made by my children, and there's a cutting board. The reason for this, we're going to see, is that the challah is...
Can you just leave small? Because your shares, you're happy to do that?
Oh, so I paused. Okay, so let me go 1 second. Okay, every time I go out of it, guys think. Okay, so let me just show you what I'm doing. Here's the challah cover. Here is the challahs. Why do we cover our challah? Because the challah is a representation. The challah is a representation of the manna. Why do we have two chalot? Why do we have two challahs? Could you get me a knife, please? Why do we have two chalot? Because for several reasons. Number one, when the Jewish people were in the desert, they were fed with the manna that came down from heaven. For those, every day they got a portion of manna, but they only had exactly the amount that they needed for that day. God told the Jewish people through Moses that when it comes Shabbat, there will be no man falling on Shabbat. Therefore, God has given to you an extra portion on Friday. So every day, if you collect extra, it will be gone or it will get spoiled. But on Shabbat, on Friday, you have to get a double portion. So we have two chalot. Now the chalot are supposed to be whole and complete. They should not be cut. It shouldn't be sliced. It should be a complete challah. Therefore, if you are small, you're just a couple, you're not going to eat two big, large challahs. That's why the bakeries know this concept very well, and they sell all different sized challahs. You could buy a little small bulk challah. As a matter of fact, this would be considered a challah as long as it hasn't yet been cut. So sliced bread wouldn't work, or a sliced challah wouldn't work. But what about this? This is a pita. Would a pita work? Or what happens if I had a matzah? Would that work? 100%. That can work. As long as it's bread and it's complete. It has not yet been cut. It doesn't make a difference how small it is. It shouldn't be too small. Okay. Very good, Moshe. Thank you. So you can use a pita, you could use tachalot. You don't have to use both chalot. I'll get more into the chalot, but I'm just going to, why do we cover the challah? So there's two reasons given. One is the reason given by Moshe, that the reason we cover the challah is because generally when it comes to Jewish law, there's a process of how you make blessings. The first blessing you're supposed to make is first on bread. And therefore the blessing on the bread should come first. However, we have to do the kiddush. So we have to do the kiddush first. So we don't want to, so to speak, make it look as though we're doing it out of order. So we cover the challah, so to speak, that the challah doesn't exist. And then we make the blessing, because if we see the challah is uncovered, it will be as though we have to make the blessing on the challah. That's the one reason given, halachically. Customarily, the other reason that we have is because the man was always covered and protected by two layers. God placed a layer of dew, and the man actually kind of like almost like floated on this dew, and that's why some people actually put a second handkerchief or just a cutting board. It shouldn't be directly on the table. You'll cut the tablecloth besides for that. And you put the challah on something, and then you have a challah on over to remind us how in the desert the man had something dew underneath, man in between, it was sandwiched in between dew. Okay, that's the other reason given for why we have the challah covers. Now, that's the way our table is set up. Now, we then would do the kiddush. We would fill up our cup, okay? We would fill up the cup to the top. Now, customarily, Kabbalistically, we try to go, if you've been to a rabbi's house, at least a Chabad rabbi, you'll see that they do something a little bit silly, which is, I don't know if you can see this on the camera. Are you watching? The bottom of the camera, it spills over. It doesn't have to spill over a lot. It's supposed to spill over a little bit. What's the reason? Because it's a cup of blessing, and we don't want to limit that blessing. So we make it overflow. Once it's overflowed, there's no point in making it overflow any more than a tiny drop. Okay? Then traditionally, we lift out our kiddush cup, and sometimes we would lift with the right posture to our left and then place it in the palm of our hand. And we say the kiddush. Now, I will post a link afterwards, hopefully, to the kiddush. And we say the kiddush standing. Why do we say the kiddush standing? I'm going to put this down and to explain. We say the kiddush standing because we're giving testimony. What's the whole concept of the kiddush? The purpose of the kiddush is that we should be saying that this is a testimony that God created the world. Shabbat is a celebration of God creating the world. So that's why we want to testify to God that you created the world. That's why every single week we stop our entire week to commemorate and to remember God, to remember why we're here, what's our mission, what's our purpose. And when we are giving testimony according to Jewish law, if you go to a Jewish courthouse, the witnesses actually have to stand while giving testimony, not like a secular court case where I think in most cases the witnesses would sit. In a Jewish courthouse, witnesses have to stand. And therefore, because we are now giving testimony, we have to actually stand. Where the concept of kiddush is it's a rabbinical law, but it's hinted to in the Torah. It says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. Zachor means to remember. We have to remember Shabbat. It also means to mention. We have to mention Shabbat. So how do we mention, we have to sanctify the day of Shabbat. How do we do this? So the rabbis learned out that the way that you do that is by making kiddush. That is why we make kiddush. Why do we do it on wine? Generally it's done on wine, because we want to do it on the most respectable type of liquid or drink that we can do. And generally wine is considered the best. So we should be trying to find the nicest, best tasting wine possible. If you don't like wine, or for whatever reason you can't get hold of wine, then grape juice will do. The next thing that we would do, we would lift the cup, we would say the kiddush. I'm just trying to make sure that I haven't left anything out. Okay, we hold up our kiddush in the right hand and we say, okay, I'm going to quickly show you how it's done, just the whole time. What we would say, okay, Yom HaShishi v'Yechol HaShamayim. I'm not going to go through the whole of Kiddush, but why do we say Yom HaShishi? What does Yom HaShishi means on the sixth day? V'Yechol HaShamayim, when God completed. What did God complete? He completed the creation. That last prayer is actually the sixth day. God completed the creation on the seventh day. So why do we say on the sixth day? We say it on the sixth day because if you take the 6 days when man was created, why was he created? In order to make God's purpose. And that's why we take the last two words of the previous, or we sanctify the words of Yom Shishi was the sixth day, and by Vayechol HaShamayim, the next words is actually the description of the seventh day when God completed. If you look at the first letters of each of those first four words, it actually spells out God's name. Yom HaShishi is Yud and a Hey. Vayechulu HaShamayim is a Vav and a Hey. That spells God's name, Yud K Vav K. Okay, to tell us that God is now being manifest in our lives in a revealed way. There's two names of God. In the beginning of creation, we use the name of Elokim, which is concealed, where in the general, during the week, godliness is not so revealed, but on Shabbat, if we tap into it, we will have the Yud K Vav K name where there's revelation. The most important part of Kiddush is the second part of Kiddush, actually. We will then say, once we finish that description of the first day of the seventh day of creation, Yom HaShishi, we then say before we say the bracha, we say Sabri Maranan. Now, if you are a Sephardi, people say L'chaim. Why do they say L'chaim? Sabri Maranan, because we're reminding ourselves there's two reasons. Number one, Sabri Maranan means attention, people. Pay attention. You have to listen in order to accept the Kiddush. You're going to have to answer Amen. People that are listening are going to say Amen. That's what we say. Sabri Maranan means attention. We also, the reason why some people say L'chaim, because we're saying that wine could be something that causes negative repercussions. And because we don't want the negative repercussions, we want only the positive things, we say L'chaim. Now, as I say, it's mainly a Sephardi custom, but if that's your custom, that's your custom. Then we say the blessing Borei Pri Hagafen. Interestingly enough, according to some opinions, the tree of knowledge was actually wine, was grapes. That's one of the reasons why we say the bracha on Kiddush. I'm going to share my screen once again, go back to the PowerPoint, so you can see just a few more things on the PowerPoint. Okay, so going over, you cover the wine. Now, how big does the cup has to be? You don't want to use the biggest cup you can get, but it should be a minimum of 3 ounces, at least about 90 mils. 86 is the very bare minimum. We generally overflow the cup. We use our right hand, our dominant hand. If you are left-handed, then you can use your left hand. We stand, we look at the candles. Now, this is something, when we start saying the Kiddush, we're supposed to look at the candles at the beginning. Yom HaShishi, as I mentioned, we have to have the candles. Why? Because as we start saying the Kiddush, we are supposed to look at the candles. Then when we get to the blessing, Borei Pri Hagafen, we are then supposed to look at our Kiddush cup. It's a good thing that most of us know that part of our heart. But these are not obligations, these are just customs. But we have that custom to look at the Kiddush cup when we get to the blessing on the wine. Then, at the end of that blessing, Borei Pri Hagafen, everybody that is not making their own kiddush, everybody else should say amen. And then at the end of the second blessing, where we actually sanctify the Shabbos, that's the actual mitzvah after the blessing of the wine, everyone once again says amen. I'm going to hopefully do a video going over this whole thing in short, the main points, and going over exactly how it's done with hopefully transliteration as sometimes. Now, once we've done that, we pour out a drop of water. Generally would have, if there's other people there, we can have a drop of wine. I don't know if you could see my tiny screen here. You pour a drop out, you drink at least half of the cup, the person making kiddush, and then we can top up. This has now got wine from the other thing. It doesn't have to be another kiddush cup. It could just be another plastic cup or whatever, or a glass cup. And you top it up, and then you would pour into the other small glasses that everybody gets from the wine. Or some people have the custom that everyone drinks directly from the kiddush cup if it is just family. Perhaps during these times, less people are doing that for obvious reasons. Okay, the next part that we're going to do, I'm going to go through the next part relatively quickly because it is getting late. It has somewhat taken me longer than I expected. The next thing we have to do customarily is we actually wash our hands for bread. So this is just going over this prevents the shame, going over the challah. Okay. Now, so we would do washing. I'm not going to go over it in another lesson. I'll go more into details. The way the washing is done, let me pause this for a second. Okay, the way the washing is done, I've got a little bucket over here. I don't really want to be pouring over. We generally try to get, our hand is held like this. We want to try, our custom, some people have the custom to do 2 times on each hand. Some people do it 3 times on each hand, but we would do 1, 2, 3, and then we would do the other hand, 1, 2, 3. I don't want to get both my hands wet. Then we would make the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam al netilat yadayim. We dry our hands, and we rub them together. We rub our hands together. Then we dry our hands after saying the blessing. Once again, the other time that we say the blessing after doing the mitzvah, there's 2 times that we do that: Shabbos candle and washing our hands. We don't want to make the blessing before washing our hands. Thank you. Beautiful. My wife noticed that I needed to tell. Very kind of her. Okay. So we generally, after we made that blessing, we try not to talk about anything other than the challah, and we would then uncover our challah. Once again, uncover the challah, and we would have salt. So we're supposed to have salt on the table, and we're supposed to dip a drop of salt. We'll talk about that in another lesson, why we do that. But we're supposed to have salt. Some people have a little salt jar, or if you just have a salt, you put a drop of salt onto your cutting board. Then here's an interesting custom. You do a small mark on the color, just a very tiny dent onto the color. Now, why do we do that? Let me explain. We don't want to cut a big mark into the challah. Why? Because as mentioned earlier, we need to have a complete challah. But on the other hand, we have another problem. The law is that you're supposed to make a blessing, and straight off the blessing, you're not supposed to have any interruption, because then it doesn't seem like you made a blessing on that particular mitzvah. So you're going to have a problem. You're going to do the blessing, then you're going to cut it. You're doing something in between. But you have another issue if it's cut already. So generally, when you have food, you're not. Let me give you an example. If you want to have a drink from of water, you should first fill up your cup, then make the blessing, and drink. But you shouldn't make the blessing, then go to the tap and fill up your water, because then you're doing something in between the blessing and the action that you're making the blessing on. In our case, we have a problem. We're eating the challah. We're not going to eat it whole, obviously, especially if it's a big one. We're not going to just chomp into it. We need to cut a piece. So therefore, what do? We make a small mark, which makes it still complete, but it's as though we've started cutting it. So we're not doing a complete action. So that's just a kind of a rabbinic way of how we get over this issue. And then we make the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem. We usually put them together. we say the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. I'm just saying Hashem. I don't want to say Hashem's name. Of course, we're still being quiet. Then I cut. I generally try to cut on the place where the mark was, and I cut my piece. I then take my piece. I dip it 3 times. Kabbalistically, we dip it 3 times into the salt, and I eat. Now, if you would be in my house or any other rabbi's house, you may notice that the rabbi is somewhat, how do I say this, unpolite. And he usually takes a bite straight away himself before serving everybody else. Not the most mannerable and polite thing to do. But halachically, that is what the rabbi, or sorry, not the rabbi, the person making the bracha has to do. They can't start giving it out because once again, that would be doing actions in between the blessings. So the person that makes the blessing has to take the first bite. I know it doesn't sound polite, but that's why people do that. Okay? Then, of course, he cuts a piece, he or she, whoever is doing it, cuts a piece for everybody. Everybody else can just answer Amen, or they can make their own bracha on the challah themselves. Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Peter, what was that?
I said that's a great story as an excuse for being rude.
100%. Sometimes you need an excuse to be rude. If you don't like it, you know, what can I say? What can I say? Not always. The rabbis were hungry and they needed to find an excuse to compensate. They hadn't eaten all day, poor pan. They couldn't wait an extra minute. Okay, that's why we are somewhat taking a bite straight away. It always disturbed me as a kid why my father would always cut it and then take the first bite. It looked like he was a rush. Can't you feed everybody else? But that's what halakha says. So in your house, the person cutting the challah, making the blessing in the challah, should do the same. Everybody else fulfills their obligations by answering Amen, and they're having the 2 loaves itself, etc. Then you have your meal. Interesting things about the meal. We're supposed to have good food. I'm not going to get into all the foods. The one main food, the Torah says we should have delicacies on Shabbos. Why? Because it's supposed to be a day of pleasures. What are the pleasures of Shabbat? So if you enjoy meat, then have meat. The one thing that the Torah does say that you should have is fish. Why? Well, number one, the Hebrew word for fish is dag, and the numerical value of the word dag, Dalet Gimel, is 7. So it's the 7th day. Number 2 is fish is the one animal that doesn't require any extra work to make it kosher. You take it out the water, it doesn't have to be slaughtered, it doesn't have to be salted, it doesn't have to be skinned, or almost whatever. It could almost be eaten as is, which is almost like a Shabbostic type of food. The other reason is that it doesn't, it's parav, you can eat it with either meat or milk. It's not, so to speak, like a messy food in that way. And of course, many people really like it. It's considered a delicacy. I think in old days, fish was more commonly eaten than meat as well. And meat is eaten as optional, but we say that if you like fish, you should eat fish. That's the only thing that halacha says that should be eaten if you like it. If you don't like it, there's no need to eat it because it's ultimately there to give you pleasure. The other customs of eating meat, if you take the word for meat, you would see that it has a connection to the number 7. It's better than cholent. Okay. We'll talk about cholent maybe one of the other weeks. We've run out of time. We'll talk, so maybe next week we'll touch on cholent. Cholent is something that we're supposed to eat on Shabbos day. There's a particular reason why we eat it. You could fulfill that in other ways too for those that don't like the vegetables. We traditionally sing songs. We're supposed to sing Jewish zmirot. There's special hymns that we're supposed to sing for Shabbat. You could find them in your bencher, chabad.org, transliteration. Once again, if anybody needs anything particular, transliteration, they struggle with the Hebrew or something they don't have, we may put a copy, maybe we'll put a copy on the chat of a link to our Shabbat guide of transliteration for those that struggle with the Hebrew, that you can do it yourself. We'll try to send it out. Also, we have the PDF, the copy. It has Hebrew, English, and Hebrew, and some more clear instructions to make sure that you feel like a pro when you do it. And that's about it. So some people, just to go over, one important thing, of course, many people traditionally eat gefilte fish. Why do people eat gefilte fish? The main reason why people eat gefilte fish is because back in the Haim, in the Shtibel, the Sfardim never ate it. As far as I know, they ate dog marakai. One of the main reasons why people eat gefilte fish is because simply it was cheaper. You were able to buy a small bit of fish, add a bunch of water and sugar, flour, sugar, water, and you had this big loaf of fish from a tiny little piece. And that's why there's other reasons given, because there's a problem of separating, and some people didn't like the concept of taking out the bones and having bony foods on Shabbos. So they also, gefilte fish is supposed to be boneless.
Should eat hummus as well.
Hummus.
Hummus in Gematria is 120, so it's gula lechiot ad 120.
Okay, that's a good one. I didn't know that. I think if you do, they say that anybody that eats hummus for 120 years, there's a segula that you will live till at least the age of 120. Let's just quickly summarize some of the last things. As I said, you score the challah, you make the blessing, you catch, you dip it into the salt, and then you share. Sorry, that was the end of the slides. Now, just to conclude, before anybody jumps into the things, once again, the class is more or less over. I've gone over time. My apologies for that. Why do we focus so much on all this pleasure and this honor of Shabbat? The reasons for this is, you'll actually, if anybody has the notes, you will see there's a little bit of a write-up from the Rebbe where he writes that God wanted us all to appreciate the Shabbat, and he wanted us, our entire beings, to appreciate Shabbat. Shabbat is a special day. As I mentioned, there's a revelation of godliness, but our bodies don't feel that. So therefore, he made us make special meals and special foods that we'll eat especially for Shabbat, would spend extra time together, and then not only would our souls have pleasure from not having to do physical labor and getting extra prayers that our bodies don't necessarily love, but God wanted that we should have both pleasures. Both our souls should have the pleasure of getting the extra learning, the extra praying, and the stopping of working, and our bodies should benefit also from ceasing to work, but also from good foods. This way, the concept of Shabbat, which is ultimately a celebration of godliness and spirituality, divinity in the world, should not only affect our souls, but should affect our entire beings. And that's one of the beautiful things of Shabbat. We're told that in the days of Mashiach, that we will have one big Shabbat, that our souls and our bodies will all feel how beautiful it is to live in the presence of godliness always.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That ends the formal part of the share. So thank you everybody for joining. If anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Good to see you, Rabbi Hella.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for coming. Good to have you on. I wasn't able to see. Slav, David, Alex, Jason, Etty. Thank you everybody for coming. Wonderful having any questions.
Rabbi,
sorry, one more point. I forgot. We didn't speak about the benching. We're supposed to do benching afterwards. There's one thing. I'll talk about benching hopefully next week, the Birchat Hamazon. There's, of course, Shabbat day. This will be going for the next 5 weeks at least. Practical Judaism, we'll talk about all these type of practical laws. So it'll be very relevant for you. But this is just the first week. So benching, we will talk about next week, hopefully. Okay, yeah, go ahead. What was the question or the statement or the...
question, Rabbi. Cutting the challah with the knife. What about tearing the challah by hand?
Yeah.
Culling the challah...
Cutting, yes. So I mean, you've demonstrated cutting the challah with the knife. With the way the plats are with the challah, some people, I think they tear it by hand. Do you have a preference there?
Okay, so I think that is actually somewhat of a Sephardi tradition.
Right.
My dad actually cuts it like a Yud K, and then he hands out the pieces to you know, pull it apart.
Okay, that's new to me, Simon. I never knew
Yeah,
that.
so
one.
he cuts the Yud K, yeah, and it's amazing. Like people say, wow, look, but that's how the tradition was.
Okay, is that a Sephardi tradition?
Sephardi tradition, yeah.
Very interesting. I've never heard that one. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and then like Joe said, then pulls it up, you know, gives the pieces.
pull them apart. So I have heard. I know that generally Sephardim have a custom to pull. I don't know the exact reasoning for that. Maybe it's to do with the fact that they don't want to have to cut and do an extra event after the bracha. Maybe that's the reason. So they, so to speak, get over it in that particular way. I'm not sure, but what I do know is that some people that kind of have mixed families, like Sephardi, they do something like Simon mentioned, they'll cut a little bit and break the rest. This way, they're fulfilling both customs.
Well, my mum's Ashkenaz, but dad is Sephardi, so maybe, yeah.
Oh, could be.
No, but no, all the time he's always cut it in the shape, and then, you know, when he hands it to the family, just, you know, gives the pieces. Once it's already cut in that shape, he hands it out to everyone like that. So, yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Rabbi,
Somebody says it was a cut. So go ahead.
For this evening's talk.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for joining. Thank you both.
We enjoyed it.
Thank you. Join us next week when we start. We're also starting a new class on Laila Tov, Toda Moshik. An interesting thing, what Moshik says that some people consider it a malacha. They consider it a work not to cut, which is interesting because you're generally allowed to cut bread, but some people have all these different types of customs, which is all amazing. So today, where we're we live in the world where everybody has come from all different places, we get to really see all the different customs, but we still see that the cores are always the same, which is something really beautiful about Judaism. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can join us next week. Also, we have Thursday at 12:30 if you want to join the same link to get us into our Ethics of Fathers class. So you're welcome to join for that as well.
All the best.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Good night.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful night. Laila Tov.
Bye.
Laila Tov.